Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 706 podcast, where on a weekly basis we decide which movies are worthy of induction into the 706 greatest movies Hall of Fame that we have created out in Salt Lake City, Utah. Opening TBD, social distancing encouraged but not required, masks viewed as tyrannical. So this week we will be discussing a movie that Tony chose. He chose my recommendation. My name's Kirk, by the way. I am going to be your host tonight. Why don't we go around and introduce ourselves? Tony, say hi to the fans.
Hello, fans.
Connor, say hi to the Connorites.
Connorites, what's up? Keep it going, guys.
Oh, there you go. And Anthony, say hi to your two fans.
Hola.
No.
Mom and Dad. That's right.
Just kidding. We all know Anthony's the heartthrob in this scenario. So, folks.
Connorites, though, are very nasty.
Yeah, they're very brutal.
They're very toxic. Absolutely.
They're all on parlay.
It was actually a coin flip whether or not their subreddit was going to be banned or the Donald. And there was so much doxing involved.
I don't endorse them. They just, they just do their own thing.
I see. Okay.
More of those classic Connor dog whistles. We know him well. He was winking that whole time.
Yeah, you guys just don't even know it. So the movie we're talking about today is a 2012 film called The Hunt, or more appropriately, Jagten in Danish, Jagten, which is Danish, which means the hunt. It is a Danish film by one Thomas Vinterberg, starring the formidable Mads Mikkelsen, who has ascended to international fame and notoriety. I am quite fond of him in a number of things. Anthony would like to say that he's quite a paragon of acting virtuosity in Death Stranding, the video game. He's also in Hannibal and quite a few other things. But anyways, that's beside the point. We're going to be going around talking about the movie. Let me give a brief synopsis just in case you haven't seen it or aren't familiar with what it's about. It essentially takes place in a rural, kind of bucolic Danish town. And Mads Mikkelsen is divorced kindergarten aide. He's a teacher who's been laid off. He's working at a kindergarten. He has kind of a close-knit group of friends, and one thing leads to another. His best friend's daughter, who goes to the kindergarten, attends the kindergarten. She, is probably 5, 6, or 7 or whatever, but she tells the head of the kindergarten that Mads Mikkelsen's character, whose name is Lucas, has been inappropriate with her. We're not told much more. There's reasons for why she says this. It's kind of explained, and we can get into that. But essentially, the movie kind of details his struggle through this accusation, through this kind of accusatory phase, how he's cut off from society, he's almost ostracized, and the eventual reconciliation. So we're going to go around and hear from everybody. Let's hear from Anthony first, because I believe he's the only one who hadn't seen the movie. So Anthony, let's hear it.
Everyone else has seen it?
Yeah, I believe
I've
so.
seen it.
I have seen it, yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting. Well, one, it's like Mads Mikkelsen in Death Stranding and his repeated phrasing of "I want my baby" will never be looked the same again. So that's one thing. But it's a very interesting thing. So like last week, Tony was making fun of me because I said that the typical Tony movie to me is a movie where like the threat of like implicit violence gets taken to its like furthest extreme and eventually happens. I think, Connor's like typical list is like a NYU Gallatin, recommended film list. Kirk's is, I realize this sort of moral complexity he like this sort of like everyday like things of like what could happen to like the everyman, and how do you treat this moral situation where if you're on the other side, you think you'd be very easy to accept. Like it'd be, you hear someone who commits something, it's very easy for you to label them, to participate in the sort of hunt, to ostracize, to do everything of what it sorts. But where the question is, you know, what if that happened to you, is kind of the simple premise of the movie. And I'm actually kind of surprised at where it takes it in the end, which is the possibility of a sort of reconciliation with certain members of the town, while I guess the more realistic side of it's still there, which is that you're still forever tainted by a lie, essentially. And I found the movie very interesting for how much of how true it felt, despite it being a Denmark thing, despite that I could see this happening in New York or any small town in America for the most part. And, you know, what do you do with that? One thing I found interesting is that his character, Mads Mikkelsen's character, never wants to move and never wants to go away, which I suppose is based on the sense of like, you know, like where does he go? His school that he originally taught at had their budget cuts, which is kind of fascinating because like from over here, we always hear how Denmark is like this like utopia, but no, like it's still like the same working class problems as everywhere else. And, you know, he's working at like this kindergarten that looks better than any other kindergarten in the U.S.,
Yeah.
but it's still, you know,
Still
like
a crappy
has its
place
own
to
problems.
work for him. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not the greatest thing. The stores are still like kind of run down. You know, it's not the greatest town. It's so rural. It's so different. But you know, that at the end of the day, the heart of it is, you know, that moral question, which, you know, I found very interesting, and I really like that the movie takes its time to unravel. The end, which I wasn't 100% sold on when I first finished it, is already kind of growing on me.
Okay, fair enough. So I just want to preface something, and I'm glad we didn't have to make this disclaimer during your analysis. But let's try to hold off on the kind of the meta-analysis. Part of the reason I chose this film is because of its applicability in today's social climate, especially online, you know, social media climate. So we're gonna save that towards the end. But let's just focus on the movie right now. You know, what you saw, how it made you feel. You know, of course, what you thought of it. So let's go to Connor next.
Sure. You know, just to speak on the cinematic level, obviously it's a movie that shocks you with kind of just the naturalism and such amazing performances and just this very lived in, very real feeling kind of world. I guess I'm talking about it like it's Death Stranding, but
the gameplay is amazing.
The
Yeah, carry the
graphics were
weight.
amazing. But no, I mean, I was really struck by the acting as I was the first time I watched it. And I just, you know, shout out to the actress who played Clara, the little girl, who just amazed me with kind of the real verisimilitude of how kids are in this movie. And just, you know, and I think this time watching it, I paid more attention because in my memory, you know, there's something that I didn't like about the film in the way that to me, eventually it becomes the kind of struggle of the innocent man against the pure evil of the kind of the society in a way, obviously a bit more complicated than that. But in this time, watching through, especially in the beginning, I noticed a lot of the nuance. So you could see kind of how things slowly kind of went awry. You could kind of track how the little girl's narrative kind of got built up and how everyone kind of, even though they're acting more or less responsibly, everyone is acting right in a more or less moral way, how this kind of horrible sort of injustice can be perpetuated. You know, I think the thing about it, and I guess again, you know, this is what's very difficult about it, is just that it's ultimately, we know the whole time that he's innocent, and that, you know, anyway, it makes it just so you're just sort of watching this perpetual sort of just things getting worse and worse, and that can be a little bit uninteresting in a way. You know, I like when I felt more for certain characters, and, you know, where I was trying to kind of see both sides. But yeah, no, I mean, obviously it's an amazing, you know, take on a social issue that's very, you know, kind of convincing in its way. And yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's quite a film.
Thanks, Connor. Let's go to Tony. Tony, why don't you round us out, as you always do?
Guys, don't you just miss when guys could just be bros? when you could hang with your pals and just do dude stuff for a while. It's like, you ever try to invite your friends over to like hang out, play some Smash Brothers, and then his wife is like, oh, so annoying, you know?
Yeah.
Just come on.
Yeah.
So like, you go to your friend's house and he's got his kids running around or whatever, invite you downstairs for the man cave, his kitchen basement restaurant thing, and you hang out with the bros and they're like, yeah, man, that's fucked up, bro. And then you do a little fist bump. And then at the end, it's all cool and you can just hang with your dudes again. And then you give your son a gun and it's just sick, bro. 10 out of 10. No, okay.
Oh, man.
No, okay.
Let's just say here that Tony signed that letter with J.K. Rowling and Noam Chomsky.
Anyway, no, I was laughing at the end of the movie when they had the literally gave his son a gun, because I was thinking like, wow, this is really like, is it just a movie about bros being bros, you know, like a very, very masculine, and there's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, no, there's definitely kind of a Maynard Boone, the kind of the men's culture kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
definitely.
no, there's a lot to unpack with that, I think, especially in the context of this kind of a story. But I'll table that for a second. But no, but I thoroughly like this movie. I think that it is a tremendously effective story. I find it very, like, at times painful to watch. There's something viscerally, like, you know, I say the word visceral a lot, and I've had this reputation, at least among my friends, I guess, of like liking these like dark and intense movies. But this is a movie that really does like make me wince in a way that few things do. I mean, there's a number of scenes here, like when things are just kind of starting to, like, you know, the feeling of dread, maybe 15, 20 minutes in, where things are starting to kind of snowball, and like right before it kind of breaks loose, and when he's starting to realize the way things are going, that's a moment, that's a psychological kind of state this movie conveys that I don't see in too many movies. That idea, that moment right before your world explodes, and you kind of know, and you don't want to admit it to yourself. You're hoping that it won't happen, but it's about to, and there's nothing you can do about it because the pieces are in motion. And I thought it conveyed that feeling, you know, incredibly well. And there's an almost nauseating quality to some of these scenes. And I mean that in a positive way, because that was what they were going for, you know? So I think that this does a very good job of putting you in the headspace of this man, of this character, and getting you to empathize with him when obviously the people in this community are not doing the same thing. And I think that the heart of this movie is actually really with Theo, his best friend, because Mads Mikkelsen's character doesn't really have much agency in the plot. He's just a guy who a lot of kind of unfortunate things happen to. So I think kind of the heart and the soul of the movie, and the character who gets the best arc, is really Theo, when he kind of comes to terms with this thing, this event, and he kind of like comes to the other side of it. And he has kind of the most important arc, but he's the one who has to look past kind of this conformity, look past this, I don't know what you want to call it, this movement, this snowball rolling down the hill, and it's so easy to be swept up in it. And he has to, especially since it's his daughter, he's so close to it, he has to take that time to divorce himself from that and have the strength to kind of push away and to see the situation for what it is. So I think that's, you know, that spoke to me, and I think that's a relatable thing that, you know, a lot of people have experienced. You know, I think a lot of people have, you know, I mean, it's obviously like this movie's in a very heightened, I mean, it's very naturalistic and it tells like a very plausible story, but it's, you know, it's the most extreme version of this, right? Like a person is accused of molesting a child. It's like the worst thing you can do, right? It's the most horrible, taboo thing. But I think we see this dynamic play out in a lot of smaller ways in our lives all the time. And just the idea of like getting swept up in something, or the choice to kind of go along or to be a little bit more skeptical. And I think that this movie does a very good job of kind of arguing for that skepticism, or like, you know, just thinking for yourself and taking time to really look into a situation. So, you know, that spoke to me, and that feels like a real thing. I mean, there were other things I noticed. Oh yeah, the other thing, to kind of go back to what I initially said, I do think there is kind of a feminist critique to be made of this movie, in that like all his friends, all his support system are kind of men, and the worst, most dislikable characters are, you know, the women. And as Connor says, you know, it's done in a pretty human, realistic, I suppose, way, where everyone involved is acting with the best of intentions. But I think there are scenes like where it pushes a little hard, like, is it Greth, her name?
The principal, like
the
sort
principal
of
kind of gets it all
yeah.
started. I mean, she is like, maybe initially we're sort of understand where she's coming from, but she becomes like almost a Dolores Umbridge level hateable character when she like climbs out the window and is like running away from it. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I felt like it was a very like this vile woman, you know, shaking your fist. And then the wife of his friend, which again, it's her daughter, so it's very understandable. But like when the daughter literally tells her like this didn't happen, she's like, yes, it did. Like it's almost a little bit like, I don't know. And that's, I'm not saying that those conversations don't happen or that it's not reflecting like a potentially real thing. I'm just saying like in the context of the movie and the way it tells its story, I could see that being kind of a criticism. It's not enough to make me say like it's a bad movie or anything, but I think it's worth pointing out and kind of interrogating.
Right.
But on the whole, I enjoyed the movie for sure.
That's totally fair. That's totally fair. So Anthony kind of touched on it. Thank you everybody for your insight. Very measured comments. Really appreciate them. Anthony touched on kind of my type of movie. So I'm a social worker by trade. I really enjoy looking at the nuances in human behavior, how it relates to how our society is structured, the purpose that structure serves, the interplay between the systemic and the interpersonal and the intrapsychic, if you want to go further. And for me, this movie really it's kind of sets a stage. It's a very linear story. There's not too much left to the imagination in terms of where you think it, you eventually get to see, you know, where it's leading, not necessarily to the reconciliation, but you can see that this is a fucked situation that is, you know, there's going to be the sides are going to be intractable in a sense. And you really get to see how somebody might respond to a situation like this, to an accusation. And it's a really, really interesting look, like a character study. And I think Mads Mikkelsen pulls it off with flying colors. I think he's such an incredible actor. And he has this presence in this movie that's like this, you know, this timidity that pervades each and every scene. He's just so on display in this movie. And I really appreciate the effort he put into it. Now, there is, you know, something to be said for like, well, this movie, and I guess we can kind of segue into this, but this movie is a direct affront or critique of the idea that we should believe women, that we should believe victims or survivors of sexual assault, of, you know, any sort of crime, harassment. I don't think this movie was made in bad faith. I really don't. Perhaps that's me being naive. I'm not sure. I really think that this was an attempt to make a movie about a nuanced situation that would make people uncomfortable, would make them question their presuppositions and really get inside the headspace. So it would draw you in and then it would hold you there and not allow you to leave until you had kind of experienced what it wanted you to experience. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think we're just starting on that? If anybody wants to offer any critique, if they think this is kind of, you know, in today's climate, for sure, this would be viewed. I don't even know if it would get a release in America because people would be quite offended by the insinuation that this girl is lying about being sexually abused, and the next step, the logical progression is, oh well, you're discounting all survivors of sexual abuse because you're planting a seed of doubt in everybody's mind. So I wonder what you folks thought of that. If you thought this movie was made in bad faith, or if you think, like I said, it's kind of just this exercise in uncomfortability, in charting new territory in the dramatic space. Okay.
Well, there's a way of quickly redeeming it, which would be, though, the sense of like, part of the problem then is that we don't have the sort of social structures of which, you know, children could actually freely talk. That because, I mean, it's obviously for a lot of people, especially in like the US, the idea of like, you know, childhood sexuality and childhood sexual learning is completely off the table. But the fact is that if there's a bit more open acceptability about just their own human body, then perhaps the child could speak a bit more freely to the truth that you wouldn't have this sort of repressed sexuality that they kind of have to dance around, because the psychiatrist, who's not even really a psychiatrist that they bring in to try to see if there's something to her story, doesn't even know like how to actually get her to talk, which is, so that's part of the problem, I think you could say, to kind of redeem that aspect. And then the other side is, I think, still what you're going for, which is a niche or a very small, intense take about the sort of situation gone wrong because of those issues.
First of all, it's a very fascinating question, a very nuanced question. I think, for one thing, as I've alluded to, and there's even other things, like his conversation with his ex-wife over like custody, and she's being so mean to him, stuff like, where there's elements of this movie that I do think fit into sort of like, I guess, like an MRA narrative, or sort of like a sexist framework that I think you could critique. And I mentioned some of those things. However, I think the core plot, the essential idea of like a falsely accused man, is not per se offensive or per se sexist, right? I think watching it in 2020, our natural inclination is going to be to view it through the lens of like, believe women and Me Too and all these things, right? But I think that one crucial difference, or one reason that doesn't map on perfectly, is that this is about an alleged child molestation. And I think culturally, we treat that kind of differently. I think that's we put that in a different category, where I think that's something that our culture takes very seriously for the most part. And I'm not arguing that it's like perfect or anything. I'm not claiming like, oh, it's, it's fine. There's no, but I'm saying that I think it's a distinct kind of problem that we conceive of in a different way. I think that we'd be talking about this movie in a different way if it were in a different, like, let's say it's set on a college campus, right? Yeah. And the Mads Mikkelsen character is like a lacrosse star, and he's got his future ahead of him, and then he's at a part, you know what I mean? Like, that would be a very different conversation in a very different context.
Or if it was just a high school.
Sure, yeah. And I mean, it's not that, so we can avoid, I think that would put us in a more uncomfortable place and a more kind of dicey situation. But I think we avoid some of that due to the context. And I think also the fact that it's in another country gives us as Americans some kind of distance from it. It makes us maybe a little more comfortable talking about it. But I do think, though, that on a more general note, when we're talking about these ideas or movies that perhaps could be read in a reactionary light, or taken by people in bad faith and used to exploit, to put forward maybe an agenda we don't agree with, I don't think we can necessarily say the movie is bad because other people might take it in that way. You know what I mean? I think if you take the movie for what it is and stay within the bounds of the movie and the story it tells, I think that its central drama is well done. And I think it tells something that's kind of common sense, that this can happen to a person, that we shouldn't necessarily always believe the worst of someone. Like, I think that's a really common sense idea that most people, when pressed, will agree with. So that was a very wrong answer, but
No, that's great. It's a great point, bringing up the difference between a child, and they kind of touch on that in the movie towards the end when they're in the church and we're talking about, this is the birth of, it's Christmas Eve, this is the birth of Christ, the kind of implicit reverence of children, and that obviously can be inferred for all of Western society, at least, that we place, and that's changed in the last, that's a relatively new thing. Children were typically looked at as, little devils, in a sense, that were, intractable and stubborn and exhibited the worst vices that we saw in ourselves. But now, with the advent of things like kindergarten and things like Piaget psychology, we see children as developmentally basic and and learning these skills as they go along, but there's also this inherent reverence that we attach to them. And sometimes we might be I don't want to say overprotective, but we might default to hysteria when even the question of a child being exposed to any sort of harm comes to mind. And so I think that there's a little bit of a play on that, and for me, it was very fitting that kind of climax happened in the church, because it was a realization that this is a little on the nose, a little corny, mawkish, whatever, that we all are God's children, and just seeing Mads Mikkelsen absolutely bawling in the church while they're singing the hymn is so touching to me. And I just, there's a restorative element to this movie that is almost heartwarming in a sense. And actually, it is. It is heartwarming to me. So, anyways, Connor, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I mean, Kirk, it's a very difficult topic. I'm sort of hesitant to even try to draw the parallel. I mean, obviously, it's it kind of requires us to, doesn't it? When we're talking about right, this idea of accusations, obviously it does. But frankly, kind of jury's out in my mind about what's really right to do in a lot of these modern situations we see. Now, I think in this case, it's rather different. We can sort of separate it also on the level, yes, that it's a child. Also, too, that, right, the accusation itself is kind of blameless, right? That it's just, she, in some ways it's weird because Clara, I guess, originally makes it up because she feels somehow rejected by our main character, that, somehow. But in any case, whatever it is, it's nothing really to be blamed. Clara is not really at fault. She ultimately is innocent, right? Even though we can say that she was wrong. So that changes the whole kind of complexion of how we engage with the story, I think, because the alternative, right? The alternative is one, that he did this and he should be punished. The other alternative, that she made it up and then no one is to blame and everyone is happy, right? Whereas, as is so often the case in these situations, people wouldn't just make this up for no reason, just out of a child's imagination, right? In almost all cases, this is the case, right? Even for most molestation cases, it's not really the case. Someone would just make it up. So you're dealing with something where you're dealing with two possible outcomes that are much, much worse, right? There is no good outcome, which makes it much more of a dilemma. So that's why it's very hard. And the nature of this movie is that it tells you that he's innocent, right? And so it's almost not applicable, I think, in a way, to those kinds of situations. It can be very instructive, I think, about sort of like how we would go about investigating something like this, especially with a child, about, sort of asking leading questions. And I think that's where it's kind of most vivid. And sure, it gets into kind of the group psychology of guilt and that kind of thing. But I think it's very hard, for me to really draw the connection there. But I think it is there to be made, obviously. But I think I'm cautious about drawing the connections between these things.
Okay, fair enough. I did want to spend a little time, and call me out if this isn't applicable, but I wanted to spend a little time talking about the nature of punishment in our society nowadays and what that looks like. And for me, it's so hard to understand. This movie allows you to see that there's some kind of extra legal vengeance, like the actual narrative with the law is very, very small compared to the social element, the communal element. And I'm curious what you folks think about the idea of how we go about punishing people in today's day and age. Who decides what an appropriate punishment is for which crime, and who does it benefit ultimately to punish somebody in a manner that is extra legal, to socially ostracize somebody, to for instance, to dox somebody, to hashtag y'all gonna lose your job type of inference, right? Like, what is, I guess it's a two-part question. What does that phenomenon serve to fulfill within us in today's society? And the second part is that just what is a more just approach to people making this it's not necessarily totally applicable, but I thought we could spend a few moments talking about it, like in instances where, say he had done this, right, and he went to prison or he was registered as a sex offender, what is the appropriate response to that as a society? How are we to treat this individual, this deviant, if he were guilty? Like that, I think you can get what I'm kind of asking. So if anybody wants to jump in, I'm curious what you have to say.
Well, this is a huge topic.
Yeah.
Like philosophical and sociological. I'm not going to have like solid answers for all these things, but I do think that there is for one thing, in terms of what you do for that person or with that person, right? I think there's a big difference between, socially ostracizing them, right, or firing them or something, or choosing not to associate with that person versus killing their dog or like throwing rocks through their windows or beating them up. I think those are two very different things, right? My personal opinion generally is that like no one is obligated to associate with you or like be your friend or like welcome you, if you do something that we've all decided is bad, right? And I don't know where that line is exactly, but like in your hypothetical, I think that would be a reasonable solution. But I don't think anyone should like beat him up or kill his dog or whatever if he's like served his time. But that's kind of outside of the scope of the movie, though. That's just asking me like my political preferences or my beliefs.
Yeah. I just wanted to clarify something. I think why this speaks to me is because this is a tight-knit community that we're witnessing here in this movie. We're being allowed to see. And in some ways, with the advent of social media, the world has become much smaller in and of itself. So we're all kind of on display, and we all have the ability, our transgressions have the ability to follow us like they had never have in history, and I'm just curious what, I don't know, whatever you want to say on this.
No, one more thing. I think these are important questions. I think they're they're a lot bigger than this venue, but I think they are important questions. I will say though that I think that there is kind of culturally a need to punish and a need to have sort of someone to bear the brunt of our societal anger and frustration and just ambient feelings of hatred and despair and all our negative emotions. That needs to go somewhere, right? So I think part of the reason we punish people, aside from like the utilitarian practical purposes of like someone does something bad or antisocial, we have to like put them somewhere, keep them away from us. I think they're culturally, we have this desire, this need to inflict pain on other people. And once someone has transgressed a sufficient amount, they have sacrificed their humanity in our eyes, and therefore they are fair game to do any punishment, any sort of pain. Nothing's off the table, right? Once they cease to be a person. And I thought about this in the scene at the grocery store when the guys are beating him up. And I see those guys beat him up, and I think these are guys that really just want to beat someone up. And he has done them this tremendous service by giving them someone they can beat up. They should be thanking him. Now they can finally let out this anger that's been sitting inside them for so long.
He's a scapegoat. He's a scapegoat in the sense that he allows everybody to focus their moral indignation upon him and to push all of their own transgressions to the periphery. Maybe, Johann beats his wife. Maybe Bert or Beck or whatever his name is doesn't pay his taxes. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, he's a scapegoat. He allows us to see the worst in us in him and to not focus about that evil inside of all of us or potential evil. And I'm not talking about child molestation, but just the idea of being deviant, of deviating from social structures. Connor or Anthony, if you want to chime in.
Isn't that sort of like in the beginning of the film too, is like when Claire's whole reason that she's for Mads Mikkelsen's character or whatever is because of her own problems at home, where her parents are always fighting, and that she kind of uses him as a sort of father surrogate. And she's kind of mad because she's rejected not just by her dad and mom, but then by her like secondary father. And the fact is that like what really sets her over the edge is when he says, maybe you should give this to your mom or dad, about the little like note she wrote him. And it's sort of what?
Yeah. No, I was saying, and also kind of another precipitating event where she learned some of the lexicon was, when she heard about, or she was exposed to pornography from her teenage brother. Right. So that's another thing. But yeah, go ahead, Anthony. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, so it's just part of the exposure of the sort of, banal evils, banal acts that, are kind of actually harmful that ultimately have the effect. And in fact, is like, that's part of, I guess, the role of the movie is Mads Mikkelsen just seems so innocent by like everybody else from the actions that they display or the opinions they hold.
Anything, Connor? What do you think?
Oh, it's just so tough, Kirk. You've raised some really like extremely deep questions that I think, yes, maybe this is not the venue, but we should all have, the ability to weigh in on them.
Right.
I think what Tony's saying is, more or less true. I think it's a little bit hard, when you think about when you're actually in that situation, in the veil of ignorance. I mean, it's so hard to separate what is righteous indignation and what is simply my projection of my own ills or whatever onto others, right? It's like so hard to tell, really. But, to bring it back to the movie, I mean, I think it's really striking, just the very ending, the fact that Mads Mikkelsen is shot at, probably he was attempted to be killed, maybe by one of his hunting companions, right? After he felt he had been exonerated, right? And the fact is that he can't see who that person is, so there's this kind of the sense of that anyone he knows, right, could secretly suspect this about him or still hold it against him, right? So, I mean, I think it's just the kind of, the pervasiveness of that thing, the kind of the fright of that thing, and in terrible isolation, right, that would bring about, not knowing necessarily where that will come from, right?
Well, I really appreciate everybody's input, and I know I kind of framed that question rather obtusely, and it's
it's not obtuse. I'm sorry, Kirk. I can't quite wrap my head around it.
No. Don't. There's nothing to apologize for. I think these are questions that are best mulled over, and whatever minor pontification we do amongst ourselves is almost secondary to how we wrap these ideas, how we wrap ourselves around these ideas in moments of reclusiveness, in moments of solitude, where we think about, our relationship to justice and all these far-flung ideas that are very important to us in an abstract sense, but also in a visceral sense. And I really appreciate everybody kind of engaging in that. So I guess why don't we just kind of head on into the next portion of our show, folks, which is we're going to take a little bit of a vote here to see whether or not this movie, in the minds of our esteemed critics, we have Roger Ebert, we have Video Game Donkey, and we have Armand White, and I'll let you decide who is who. You guys can choose.
My three favorite guys.
5 out of 5.
Yeah. So anyways, whoever wants to jump in, let's start with Tony.
Okay, one final kind of thought, and I appreciate, Kirk, your job moderating this week, because you brought up a lot of really good and really kind of troubling, difficult questions that I think we'd all do well to think about. And I think that one cultural trend I don't like is I feel like there's this need to immediately have an opinion on anything that has happened, like you need to know what to think of it right away, and you need to proclaim your opinion about it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this movie is necessarily about that. I don't know how this was, if it was that way in 2012, it probably was to an extent. It feels like it's more the case now. So in that sense, maybe this movie is prescient. But I think we do all do well to do more of what you have said and really think about these things and take time to introspect and search for meaning and search for answers. And so I think that the fact that this movie is capable of putting us in that place and making us think about these things, even if, as I've said, it is kind of problematic in certain ways, it's got to go in the 706. So I'm saying yes.
Sounds good. All right, Connor. Going down the line here.
This is a little bit of a tough one, Kirk, though obviously I have immense respect for it. I don't know. I'm just like, I'm not. Yeah. On the one hand, yes. No, it is an amazing take on a social issue. Yes. I mean, the acting, the naturalism is amazing. But I don't know. I'm just not sure I can quite give it a yes.
Fair enough. Okay. And then we come to the deciding vote. The California, the Electoral College here. Let's
We'll be a Florida,
the most
really,
important.
We don't know.
Yeah, that was
Texas,
a bad example.
Finally going blue.
The only reason I said California is because Anthony's from California. Yeah, more. We need a Florida or an Ohio. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, Pennsylvania. One thing I'm actually interested in too is one thing I liked about the movie is like you never actually see the characters like in the corner like whispering to each other. when he's like walking around, and the total like absence of like the gossip of being in person or even online. Like the fact, like, you know, you don't see like them going on Facebook and being like, did you see what, you know, did you hear what happened to Marcus and Lucas today? You know,
There's
I'm
no
actually
Facebook sequence, yeah.
But it's weird because like you would think it'd have to be there even at this time, you know, 2012. You know, if the movie's even set a few years or whatever. But anyway,
it wasn't so inculcated, I guess, in the culture. You know, people would have done it.
Maybe in Denmark it's such a small, or at least the area of, you know, where this film takes place, it's so small that they don't care yet, or it's not as big.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's obviously a different type of communal gossiping taking place. But anyway, I guess like Tony, I've taken the red pill here, and I'll say yes.
All right.
Nice.
Fair enough. There we go. We have our.
So are we going hunting or what, boys?
Yeah, we have another induction into our canon. And for those of you keeping score at home, we're now up to the pace of finishing this thing by 2050, and we'll put out the book at that time. So,
Yes.
anyways, let's.
It'll be an ebook probably.
Yeah, it'll be some sort of implant, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever they'll have at that time. Yeah, we don't know.
Anthony, you have gone least recently, so you can decide the order for nominating our next film, which I will choose, and you all will nominate. So go ahead, Anthony. What do you want?
So I'm trying to decide if I'm going to select it with Kirk in mind or do one for myself. So I'll go last.
The Scorsese.
Sure. Wise choice. Who should go first? Anthony.
Let Tony go first.
Sure.
All right. You know what we should do, guys? This is a movie that if you don't like it, I don't even know what to say. I don't even know what to say. You disgust me.
Joker.
Yeah, exactly. No, I was gonna say Barry Lyndon. Barry Lyndon would be a great episode. I mean, it's a long movie, but there's just so much there. It's one of the chewiest, one of the yummiest, one of the most sumptuous, just delectable masterpieces from Stanley Kubrick, and I think we'd all have a lot to say about it. So, yeah.
It's interesting. I would definitely call Barry Lyndon one of his more divisive ones.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I would not call it like a crowd pleaser. You know, I wouldn't say that liking it is, you know. But anyway, but no, I mean, I do like Barry Lyndon.
All right.
But it was an interesting introduction. But
Connor, what do you got?
As for me, I've had it with Anthony every single time, every episode over the past like 3 episodes. He's like, "That's a Gallatin pick. That's an NYU, you know, intellectual pick." So I'm going a little bit populist this time. I'm going for just a real banger, kind of slept on, historical adventure epic film, Mongol from 2007, about the life of Genghis Khan. Russian-made film, but you know, generally, you know, it's a Hollywood epic as you might expect it. It's not made in Hollywood, obviously, but sort of about the story of Temujin, that's who became Genghis Khan, and his relationship to his friend Jamukha. And it's just a great story. It's actually just a wonderful story that sort of stands on its own outside of history, but plenty of battles and adventures and that sort of thing.
Wow. Okay. And Anthony, let's hear it.
All right. So the first one I was going to pick is not currently available anywhere, so that's out. And then the one I was going to pick for Kirk, I'm going to hold off on for another time. So I'm going to do an Anthony pick. And wait, well, first of all, I would love to know if Joker is actually an NYU Gallatin sort of pick, Connor, because I don't remember saying it like that.
It's an interesting argument.
Yeah, that was
that's another point. But all right. So since someone here has been very critical about Wuhan and has expressed some anti-Wuhan sentiment, I'm gonna nominate a movie that uses the Wuhan dialect. It's a recent one, sort of neo-noir, called The Wild Goose Lake. It's a sort of Refn-like crime thriller, obviously based in China, and I just don't want to say anything about it because it gives it away.
Cool.
Very Refn-like, very Driver what's the Neon Demon-esque?
Only God Forgives.
Yes. Basically, though, gangster on the run, sacrifice everything for the family. What decisions are he going to make?
Okay.
Well,
All right. Now we get some rebuttals. Anybody want to go for it?
If I wanted to watch Muggle by J.K. Rowling, no thanks. Not this week, folks. And The Wild Goose Lake is my favorite movie of all time. I just think Barry Lyndon would be a good movie to do an episode on. I don't know. I feel like it's a classic, but it's not 2001. It's not, I don't know, Dr. Strangelove. It's slightly more off the beaten path, but it's a movie I think everyone should see at least once. I assume, I don't know, most of you have seen it. I don't know if you've all seen it, but I just think it'd be a good movie to do an episode on. And I think there's no shortage of great little bits and details, and there's a lot of fodder. It's got some good wizardly fodder. That's it.
I have been wanting to rewatch Eyes Wide Shut, and I almost wanted to say that for this episode.
That's a good one.
Or this meeting, whatever. But I will say Barry Lyndon, it's like 3.5 hours long, and all in my memory of it is sitting in AP English and our teacher putting that on after we read that book and just being so miserably
cool
bored.
Teacher. Yeah.
Yeah, you got
I was way too young to watch that, and all I have this memory, but it's 3.5 hours.
Also, it's 3 hours, not 3.5.
Kirk is gonna need 3 weeks to watch it.
I gotta start watching it now, man. I don't know.
It's like a TV show for him.
Yeah, jeez.
Just pretend it's unsolved mysteries, dude. Binge watch.
Yeah.
Connor's pick. I'm sure Matt Damon plays it great.
Matt Damon obviously makes a cameo appearance in Medieval Mongolia.
Or John Wayne. So.
Oh yeah, we should watch that movie, the John Wayne Genghis Khan.
Oh
Genghis Khan.
yes.
The movie they all got cancer when they made because they filmed it on a radioactive waste site.
I didn't know.
Yeah,
that.
Look it up. Fun.
I thought that was Stalker.
Anyway, I know that one, and it is a similar story. It covers the same thing as far as I know. But anyway, to rebut the others, I think you just got to go with your taste, Kirk. What are you feeling for next week? I would say Barry Lyndon, as Anthony pointed out, it's a very long one. It's a very dry one. I don't think it quite grabs your attention. You have to kind of come into it. You have to be kind of interested in it to begin with, I think. To really
fun, entertaining movie. I don't know. I think. Sorry. Okay. Yeah.
There's definitely some fun parts, but that would be my argument about it. And I know nothing about Andy's movie. It sounds really fascinating.
Yes.
But like I said, if you're feeling just a nice adventure, learn a little bit about Mongol history, I think you might like mine.
Oh man.
All right, so NYU Gallatin post-colonial.
I feel like I'm being placated in the
syllabus.
wrong way. Connor's like, look, shiny sword.
No, this is really what I was feeling.
Barry Lyndon, that's too complex. You don't want to deal with that shit, Kirk. Let's do
No.
No, I'm kidding.
No, it is pretty dry.
I have not seen any of these movies. I know, shock. I haven't seen Barry Lyndon. I'm a heretic, but would be nice to cross it off the list. And I don't know how else I'll get to it because it does seem quite, I don't know. It doesn't necessarily jump off the screen for me. I don't even know what it's about, really. It looks like Mel Gibson's The Patriot, but
it's just that. It's that
just
twice.
Yeah.
Just with more slaves, I guess.
No, they put it in Final Cut and they slowed it down to make it work.
No, this is tough. So we got Anthony here, who I do respect Anthony's tastes generally. Even didn't you nominate Shop Around the Corner? I thought I was going to hate it, and it was.
Oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Forgot about that.
And I really like that.
James Stewart.
So I really can jive with that. And then Connor, that does sound quite interesting. I like Mongol history. I like action movies and stuff. Okay, I have a deciding question. Connor, is your movie dubbed or is it English?
It is subtitled. It's all
Or I mean, yeah, subs.
in Mongolian of some kind. I don't think it's like period correct, but you know.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. You know
Our
what?
movie's also in Mongolian.
We can watch the Mongolian
All our
dub.
movies.
It's actually the best one.
Okay. You know, I think this week I'm gonna give it to, and I'll explain my reasoning. I'm gonna give it to Anthony, and the reason is because I'm trying to go outside my comfort zone a little bit, and Connor's was the natural pick and the movie I do want to watch.
You passed my test, Kirk.
But
All a trick.
I have found that some of the more fulfilling episodes are when I go into a movie not expecting much and finding a real gem. And so I'm gambling that this is the case. And if it's not the case, it'll be a really entertaining episode where I'll just be kind of pissed the whole time. A la
Yeah, you
Cash
just be shouting coronavirus every 5 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, I think
like Anthony's last movie, Kirk. Just so you know, bigger than life. That was
no, I know. That's what I'm saying. It is a gamble. It is a gamble. But when he said reffin, you know, that kind of drew me in. That was a little buzzword that got me peaked my
interest. Kind of spice it up, you know.
Yeah, it sounds pretty cool.
Dark cinematography. Anyways,
I gotta say, we'll end it there. Yeah.
No, go ahead, Anthony. Go ahead.
I gotta say though, I almost went with my heart right here, like, and I really wanted to nominate and try to force these two to watch Selena.
Oh, what the fuck?
Wait, what's Selena?
Oh my God, Connor!
You'd have made my job so much easier.
I don't know what that is either.
Really?
No.
All right, it's a future pick, Kirk.
Sorry, everybody
These
else.
Uncultured individuals.
Say, you should watch Barry Lyndon at some point. I genuinely, everyone should see it. I think.
Coming from a man who's never seen Selena, just
well,
can't look at you the
maybe
same
I need
way.
to see that. It doesn't mean Barry Lyndon's not good.
You know, my only exposure to Barry Lyndon is the guy in Room 3? What's
237?
237. He says Kubrick was bored with Barry Lyndon, and so that turned me off.
That's such a great quote.
We should do Room 237. I'm gonna store that in my mental bank. Anyway,
Tony fell asleep during that movie.
He did. I know that. Tony, what did you say?
I said I just watched. I'd seen it several times before, but I just rewatched The Shining this week. So
there we go. You're primed for it.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Thanks for hanging with us. That was another edition of our 706 podcast. We really appreciate your listenership, and we want to remind you that Audible.com is our co-sponsor for this episode. We actually do have a new audiobook highlighted in our collection. It's called what was the name? Oh yeah, The Wall by Matt Damon. It's actually just it's a table read, and it was before Matt Damon learned that he wasn't supposed to do like an Asian affectation. So it's kind of it's a little risky. But anyways, 50% off if you want that, jump on it. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, folks. Bye-bye.